Hello, welcome to week 3 of class power and social inequality. Today we are going to talk about the relationship between class identity and higher education. So let's jump in and get started. Colleges and universities are founded on exclusion. I think that's the most important thing to remember. The first college, the College of William and Mary, and the first university, Harvard University, are both founded around 1635. It would be another 200 years before white women were added to the mix of eligible students at colleges and universities built in the image of the College of William and Mary and Harvard University. Starting in 1837. It would be about another 20 years before the Seven Sisters colleges would start to open specifically for white women to mimic or mirror the all white male educations that were happening at other universities and colleges that refused to admit women. It would be another 100 years, so 300 years from the founding of the first colleges and universities before Black and Brown students would be legally admitted regularly to these institutions. As a result, college degrees become the first, in a lot of ways, tools for and symbols of salary and occupational prestige in the United States. If you think about the first sort of really prestigious jobs, occupations in the United States, they were teacher, doctor, lawyer, clerical worker, though that sounds funny to say now because we associate clerical work with women. Initially, to be able to type was something that you would learn in college or university, and only white men could do that. And so they were the ones to hold those sorts of jobs. We understand those jobs today and back then as prestigious because, in part, you need to have a particular level of an amount of education to do them. And as a result, for hundreds and hundreds of years, we have compensated those occupations relative to our understanding about the level of intellect and hard work that goes into being able to do that job. Theoretically, that should mean that going to college and getting a college degree should be associated with upward social mobility, the ability for an individual to improve their class identity, moving up the hierarchical class ladder over the course of their lives or between their parents' lives and their lives as adults. However, we know that that isn't exactly how things have played out. And though Black students and Brown students are getting college degrees at higher rates than they ever have, that's having very little impact on their class identity and class status after the fact. School integration following the Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court ruling in 1954 was supposed to create more educational and, by extension, economic equality. However, because institutions and local and state governments were so adamantly against desegregation, Black and Brown students, though they would eventually be willingly admitted into these schools, were not, from the very beginning, able to extract the same kinds of economic capital from attending those institutions as their white counterparts. In this picture, you can see James Hood and Vivian Malone, two incoming students, trying to enter the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa on June 11th, 1963. The governor of Alabama, George Wallace, a notorious racist, ordered the entry to the university barricaded to prevent Hood and Malone from entering the university. And so the federal government sent the National Guard down to escort them. It was these kinds of responses to desegregation which solidified the non-belonging of Black and Brown students on college and university campuses, and therefore their ongoing inability to, again, extract the same kinds of capital from attendance at those places. Post desegregation, starting in the early 1960s, everybody starts to go to college more. You can see this ever increasing chart here. There is a small blip around the apex of the Vietnam War, but other than that, we see an increase in college attendance across the US population. That is especially true of Black and Brown students in the 20th and 21st centuries. So by the late 1990s and hitting its apex in the mid 2000s, you see Black and Brown students entering colleges and universities at higher rates than they ever have before. And we continue to see students across racial boundaries entering colleges and universities at high rates over time, even despite recessions and the increasing cost of colleges and universities over time. That increase in people just generally being able to go to college meant that because as humans, we're very much interested in order and creating boundaries. And as American capitalists, we are very interested in maintaining class hierarchies. More gatekeeping arose as students started to enter college at an increasing rate. I'm sure that you have seen the recent announcements by Ursanus College administrators about our institution's place on recently released lists of the top liberal arts colleges in the country. Um, if you were applying to colleges, I'm sure that you at some point looked at the US News and World Report rankings of colleges and universities in the country. It's probably the most popular one, right? And we use those things to think about which institutions we should attend, and by extension, how much economic capital we'll be able to extract from that institution because of its place in these hierarchical rankings. I want to say, though, that these rankings are not about the quality of the institution. Um, let's take teaching, for example. You're not going to get wildly different teaching at Ursinus than you are going to get at Harvard, for example. And that's because only about 100, 150 universities around the country are PhD degree granting institutions. And most faculty positions require a PhD. That means that the majority of faculty that are teaching at colleges and universities around the country were trained at the same 100, 150 or so institutions. And therefore, there's very little variation in the quality and level of teaching that you're going to get that is rooted in some institutional difference. There may be individual differences based on skill level, but that doesn't have to do with training, right? And can't necessarily be gauged via just hiring practices. If you think about the buildings and the places in these colleges and universities, most share the same amenities, the same kinds of athletic, recreation centers, dining halls, dorms, parking. Those things continue to remain relatively even across institutions because they're competing with one another, right? So you can't have one institution have wildly different amenities than another because they'll attract more students And that's what the colleges and universities are grappling for, right? Students over time. So if that's the case, then what we're talking about when we're talking about rankings of colleges and universities is actually student quality. What's the average GPA? What's the average ACT or SAT score? What's the average AP test score? How many AP courses did the person take? What kinds of extracurricular activities are they involved in? Did they write a book? Do they volunteer with the Peace Corps? What are the sorts of things that the students that we admit to this institution doing that makes our institution better or worse, though nobody wants to be worse, than other schools on the list. If that's the case, right, that gatekeeping continues to happen as more students attend colleges and universities to create and maintain these hierarchical boundaries, then that means that all schools are not created equal, and the quality of the school that you attend has race and class-based dimensions. You can see in this chart, Black and Brown students are much more likely to attend for-profit institutions. Well, why does that matter? Because for-profit institutions have different perception of quality on the job market, which means that when you're competing with other graduates, you are likely not going to get hired if you are competing with a graduate from a non profit driven institution, which is most state and private colleges and universities, because we perceive the quality to be better. Um, For-profit institutions also tend to be cheaper to attend, and they are more, what's the word that I'm looking for? Devious in their ability to help you fund these sorts of institutions. So they might send you to for-profit loan companies as opposed to federal loans. They may be more willing to give you loan money to attend the institution to attract you in because they understand that the quality of the degree that they're getting is less. On the flip side, Black and Brown students who generally come from lower class backgrounds than white people are more likely to be attracted to for-profit institutions because the cost of attendance is lower. And here we see again class inequalities being perpetuated by institution and having these race and class-based dimensions. If we're talking about quality of student, then we're talking about standardized test scores as well, and those reify inequalities in colleges and universities because of the connection to admission likelihood, right? So if I get a 32 on my ACT, then I'm more likely to be admitted to sort of higher status colleges and universities than if I do worse on the ACT if I get a 22 or a 24, for example, right? I'm not saying that those are bad scores, but what I'm saying is colleges and universities admit people in part based on those scores. And so if your score is lower, then the likelihood that you get admitted to a higher quality school is also lower. Well, what we know about standardized test scores is that they're not actually a test of intelligence or readiness for college, um, and they have a lot of classist and racist implications because of the people who create them and the cultural barriers and boundaries that are imbued into the tests themselves. And so there again creates this inequality that is race-based, especially that is associated with what colleges you get into, and therefore the view of the degree that is granted from that institution. But this isn't all about income, right? It's about status as well. It's about saying that you graduated from a particular institution. Do you remember the Operation Varsity Blues scandal? Take a look at this video and let's talk about it.
On Becky from Full House, taken into custody by FBI agents. That is a sentence that I never thought would come out of my mouth. I'm here at the federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, where Lori Loughlin appeared in court today, just one day after Felicity Huffman faced the judge. We have the latest on both stars and their alleged roles in the largest college cheating scam in history.
With you as a mom, it doesn't seem like you've had very many pitfalls.
Oh, thank you very much. I mean, we've had our moments.
You could say today was a moment. Lori Loughlin surrendered to the FBI and was taken into custody. Next stop, federal court in downtown LA. Lori's case was called a little after 3 p.m. Pacific, and frankly, she looked like someone whose world had been turned upside down in the last 24 hours. Her bond was set at $1 million, the same as her husband, and she will be allowed to travel to British Columbia to complete work. Today's hearing is, of course, a day after Lori's husband and Felicity Huffman posted bail and were released. Lori was in Vancouver filming Garage Sale Mystery for the Hallmark Movies and Mystery Channel when the bombshell sting operation unfolded yesterday. The couple allegedly paid $500,000 to get their daughters into USC. Now, in the wake of the scandal, both Lori and Felicity's past TV roles are coming back to haunt them.
You asking for a bribe?
You pretending you're above that?
I got my checkbook.
We may have, well, he may have embellished, lied a bit on our application.
It only shows you want what's best for your boys.
Then there's what Lori and her two daughters, Isabel and Olivia, told ET back in 2016.
What is the best advice that your mom has given you?
Be classy, your reputation never fades.
If you get slapped with a stigma or something negative, it's hard to recover. So, and also I always tell them in this day and age, online, it doesn't go away.
Lori's youngest daughter, Olivia, is learning that lesson the hard way.
I don't know how much of school I'm going to attend. I don't really care about school, as you guys all know.
The USC freshman and YouTube star is taking a ton of online heat for seemingly profiting off her dorm life.
Today, Amazon is coming to shoot some of my room because they hooked me up with basically everything in my dorm.
So how is the rest of Hollywood handling the admissions scandal?
We know.
Okay, the wild thing about that is that that's not about class at all, because these are rich families, they're celebrities in some cases. Their children don't need to go to high quality, high status institutions in order to achieve upward social mobility. They're already members of the upper class. Their parents have enough money for their children to be upper class well until their children's adulthood, right? This is about instead the status that is associated with attending particular schools. And in this case, these celebrities are able to use their income, their disposable income, to buy status for their children. And so in this case, higher education is perpetuating class inequalities because there's so much social value associated with graduating from these high status schools that rich families are willing to take spots that might otherwise go to disadvantaged students. In some cases, right, they're taking athletic scholarships for sports that they don't play. To get into these schools where maybe Black and Brown students would benefit long term economically more than these students. But that doesn't matter to them or to their families. They want the status of attending these institutions. Income does affect standardized test scores, though, as well. You can see in this chart here how a family's income impacts a student's math standardized test score by race, right? And if we know that standardized test scores, again, are being used as part of admittance, even in things like the Operation Varsity Blues scandal, we can see how really college student applications as they are currently constructed is sort of a step-by-step way to maintain class inequalities amongst the students who are applying to these institutions. Post-graduation, class inequality widens even more. You can see in this chart here that Black graduates are more likely to have debt and less likely to be employed 4 years post-graduation than their white counterparts. And so, even as Black and Brown students begin to, or I should say, continue to enter college and to complete college degrees at rates higher than they ever have, that doesn't have the same economic impact after the fact for this variety of reasons that we've talked about, culminating in the amount of debt that they have to pay back after graduation. Okay, I'm going to leave us, as I always do, with a quick active learning exercise just to help you digest some of this information. And this one's really simple. Just jot down a couple of thoughts that you have about what you hope your Ursinus education will do for your class identity. Are you planning to go to graduate school? How do you think that will impact your class identity? Why are you considering going to graduate school? What connection does that decision have to your overall class identity? Okay, I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.